Hi lovelies and welcome back to this channel. If you're new here, my name is Belinda's channel. Thank you so much for all the love and support. Don't forget to please subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications so that anytime I upload a video, you will be the first person to be notified. And to my returning subscribers, thank you so much for all the love and support. To those people that share my videos, leave commentaries, and also educate you guys are the real MVP. Thank you so much for all the love and support. Alright lovelies, let's dive in. So lovelies, I came across this video on my For You page on TikTok, which happens to be a continuation of Byron Donald viral video of how he was like, he preferred black people to go back to Jim Crow era, where black people actually have families, why, and it actually got a lot of people reacting. So this is a kind of, continuation. I'm just going to roll the clip. Please leave me your own thoughts and let's dive into it.
He interviewed with Phillip over at CNN and she got him together. He had the unmitigated gall to go on over to Joy Reid. Yeah, the Joy Reid. And she did not disappoint. This is how the interview started.
Now by Florida Republican Congressman Byron Donalds. Congressman, thank you for being here. We played that lengthy segment. That is what you posted on your social media. The part of what you said that people take issue with is this line, which I'm going to read back to you again. You see, during Jim Crow, the black family was together. During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative. Black people have always been conservative-minded, but black people voted conservatively. But it is that during Jim Crow, the black family was together. That's what people have taken issue with. What are they missing?
Frankly, what's really happened is that you have, Democrats and you have the Biden campaign, and some of the media want to twist my words for political purposes. The overarching issue is talking just about black families and why you're seeing a trend of black people leaning towards Republicans in this election cycle and probably in election cycles to come. And part of that, is that when you're raising families, raising kids, etc., you're now thinking about all of the public policy issues, all of the economic issues, all of the education issues. And that's leading people to have divergence in political thoughts. That was the only point. The stuff that comes up about Jim Crow and twisting my words, saying I was being nostalgic or saying that Jim Crow was good for black people, that's all political spin. It's a lie. It's gaslighting. And that's truly unfortunate.
So here's the challenge, Congressman. You started out talking about your family, talking about your mom, talking about being raised, and you on your own brought up Jim Crow. In fact, you said Jim Crow 3 times for emphasis. It wasn't the media or the Democrats or gaslighters who brought up Jim Crow. It was you. You brought up Jim Crow. So
now, in the video that I did on yesterday, side note, if you didn't see the video that I uploaded on yesterday in regards to Byron Donalds and his statement, it's because TikTok suppressed it. Y'all know how TikTok does, right? I'm a black woman on this app talking about political and social issues, and I'm providing sources that will further educate you on the subject that is being discussed. And in that video on yesterday, I broke down part of what Byron Donalds had to say, because part of what he had to say was a lie. Black people voted more conservatively during Jim Crow. From 1878 to 1960, black people voted more conservatively. I had to break that down. I broke down some of the laws that were implemented during Jim Crow and how they were designed to treat people as second-class citizens, to subjugate black people. Yeah, and I made a point that Byron Donalds could have stood on part of his statement that black people are more conservative in their line of thinking, that the black family was stronger under Jim Crow and black marriage happened more often under Jim Crow. He could have stood on that. He didn't have to bring in Jim Crow, but he did. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? There's only one reason that I can think of for him to do that, and that would be to muddy the waters of history. to purposefully be intellectually dishonest, to jump on board with diluting how barbaric white people treated black people at a certain point in history. That was his purpose. Because we all know he didn't specifically say black people were doing better in Jim Crow. He didn't specifically say that. But to tie Jim Crow into one of the positive aspects of the black family, to tie that in to the Jim Crow era, you are trying to insinuate that black people were doing better because they were married during Jim Crow. But it doesn't end there. Joy-Ann Reid goes on to say this in the interview.
Also said, and I'm quoting you again, during Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative. Black people have always been conservative minded, but black people voted conservatively. Black people weren't allowed to vote at all during Jim Crow.
Well, first of all, there were areas in the United States where black people did vote.
Under Jim Crow?
It wasn't universal throughout the United States. So let's just be perfectly honest about that. I just told you it was not universal.
We know Jim Crow wasn't throughout the United
obviously
States.
Black people were suppressed from voting. That's what the purpose of not just the 64 and the 65 voting rights act, but so many others. But let's get back to what I was saying.
So you're inaccurate.
All I was talking about is about black families. No, I'm not being inaccurate.
During Jim Crow, more black people voted conservative. They didn't vote conservative because they weren't allowed to vote. That is the essence of what Jim Crow is.
So again, Joy, I'm going to come back to my original point. It is talking about the family unit, having more fathers in the home, which creates better people.
Last question, and then I'm going to let you go. Last question. We're out of time, but I'm going to give you one more question. During Jim Crow, could your family have existed? You are in an interracial marriage. Your wife is a white conservative activist. Could your family have existed at all during Jim Crow?
No, it could not, Joy, and we all know that. But that's why I am blessed to live in America today as opposed to America during that time. But we cannot ignore the realities of not having fathers in homes. That is important for black people today and all people today as we move forward for a better America.
We are out of time. What I'm grateful for is that we do not live in the Jim Crow era and that fathers do not face lynching.
I'm very grateful of that.
Perhaps don't bring up Jim Crow when you're trying to make that example. Representative Byron.
Shout out to Queen Joy-Ann Reid for getting him together. And I'm going to end with this. Byron Donalds saying that black people were getting married under Jim Crow. The black family was stronger under Jim Crow. I can agree with that. But what Byron Donalds was doing, Byron Donalds was using the Jim Crow era to insinuate that black people were better off because the black family was stronger, or the black people were getting married under Jim Crow. That's where he's being intellectually dishonest. The Jim Crow era was a different time, different social structure than it is today. There are a lot of older black women that will tell you today that they had to stand for some things back during the Jim Crow era from their husbands so they wouldn't be looked down upon as less than in society. You know, you were viewed as less than, as you were a problem because you weren't married back during those times. Today, there is no such stigma. In fact, black women refuse to be beat on, lied to, cheated on, and have to carry the weight of taking care of the children and paying the bills. So they're opting to remain single today. He's not telling black men to do better. No. He's romanticizing and insinuating that black people are running towards the Republican Party because they're supposed to be the party of family values, because they're reverting back to what took place in Jim Crow. He's also trying to muddy the waters when it comes to black history. That is my opinion. That's all I got. I'll see y'all later.
Claiming that the black family was stronger during Jim Crow, when we can actually talk to our relatives about that, is a wild claim. Recently, Byron Donalds, while trying to campaign for that other guy who was running for president, decided to stop into my hometown and drop foolishness about the black family. Before someone jumps in and says, "Oh, you're twisting his words," let's see what he actually said. Reading here from the Washington Post, you see, during Jim Crow, the black family was together. During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative. Black people have always been conservative-minded, but more black people voted conservatively. Let's talk about the voting thing. Because what Byron seems to forget is that, especially during Jim Crow, there were numerous laws and efforts to suppress the black vote. Reading from the History Channel, there was literacy tests to make sure that people could read, some of them being so impossible that even white people couldn't pass them. But you know, they were grandfathered in. Poll taxes, which made voting inaccessible, not to mention all white primaries, clearly designed to suppress black people from voting or running for office. Now let's talk about the black family thing. And there's literally people that you can ask about living through Jim Crow South. I did that. And here's just a handful of things that black people had to endure living in the second-class citizenry of Jim Crow. We had to address white people as boss, captain, miss, or missus, despite our ages. We had to endure the regular use of the N-word. We had to step off of the sidewalk if we saw white people approaching. We couldn't eat or even shop at the same places. Don't even try to try on shoes. Y'all remember when I talked about the vanilla ice cream thing? Just petty. Don't even talk about pools. Y'all know how bigots feel about pools and bodies of water. We were also excluded from public parks and public events. We had separate entrances to theaters and entertainment centers, and we often had to sit in worse quality seats. We weren't even allowed to attend county fairs unless it was something called Collard Day. Do we even have to talk about the healthcare system and how we had completely separate wards in the hospital despite emergencies? I could keep going. There are very few safe spaces for black folks and black people outside of church and our families. Everything about Jim Crow was created to demean and diminish black people. But let's zoom into what Byron was really suggesting. Because for me, it seems like too quick a shift to jump from the black family was together to black people were voting conservatively. The implication here is that the only way that black families are strong is if they vote or think conservatively. When if Byron actually paid attention to any of those history classes, he would realize that black people voted a certain way out of survival, and that what you would call strength and unification was based out of that. Because if we really voted the way we really wanted to vote, y'all would think we were the most extreme of liberals. Unfortunately, our very beings are political, not made by us, but by those who would seek to suppress and oppress us. Perhaps instead of making wild claims about our families, perhaps learn a little history and stop using racist supremacist tropes for attention. Oh, so y'all don't just do this for slavery. Y'all just gonna do this for every historic terrible thing that has happened to black people. I don't have to live through Jim Crow to know that it was terrible. And yes, I do trust the accounts that I've read about it. Why? Because too often those accounts were largely ignored. And it was only up until fairly recently that we even started listening to first-hand accounts. But honey, Jim Crow ended in 1965. My mother was here. My dad was here. My uncles and aunts were here. My grandparents, both sets, were here. My great-grandmother, who I grew up knowing until I turned 30, was here and told me plenty. There's nothing wrong with going by what we read. It's very strange to instill doubt in things that people have read when a lot of people clearly don't read. But furthermore, you want us to ignore our own parents, our own grandparents, our own great-grandparents? Because like I said, so many of our stories have been largely ignored up until fairly recently. I'm not ignoring what my mom told me about Jim Crow. I'm not ignoring what my grandmother and grandfathers told me about Jim Crow. I'm not ignoring what my great-grandmother told me about Jim Crow. Nor am I going to ignore the many, many stories about that particular time that I've read. The only people who want to sow doubt in such things are the people who are invested in keeping them buried. Hope that helps. Bye.
So the last couple of videos that I did in regards to Byron Donalds and his insinuation that black people were doing better under Jim Crow because the black family was stronger and black people were getting married. I did my own video, and then I shared some excerpts from Joanne Reid's interview with Byron Donalds. Now, I'm going to share with you an excerpt from Abby Phillip's interview with Byron Donalds. If you haven't seen any of the videos that I've done, it's because TikTok is suppressing it, so you're going to have to go back and into my profile on my page to get to the videos. But let's listen to what Abby Phillips said to Byron Donalds.
Abby, let me put it to you like this. In the Jim Crow era. Let's agree on something. I am, obviously one of the better communicators in the Republican Party. I know how to put words together.
Obviously
I do it very,
not.
very often. So I'm not going to say something that I do not agree with. What America is seeing right now, especially Black America, is the gaslighting that unfortunately does happen in politics, where you take my comments and you want to weave your own political viewpoint into what I said. What I said is very clear.
I asked you to explain because I wanted to. What I want to undo is understand what you're saying here. Because if you're making a comparison, you're saying the Black family was together then, they're not together now, and you're using that to try to say that things are bad now. Well, first of all, let me just to set the table here. By pretty much every available measure, Black families, Black individuals in this country are better off today than they were during Jim Crow. Would you agree with that?
Abby, of course I would. I'm not making that point, and this is the problem. What the Democrats, what Hakeem Jeffries did on the House floor, what Jamie Harrison, what the president of the NAACP, what the Biden campaign, because they're the ones who started this. It was really the Biden campaigns who were trying to cherry pick everything. They're trying to twist my words into saying something. I never said that. What I was talking about was specifically Black families, and the point that Black families being together is a great thing for the Black community, and you do have to acknowledge the empirical fact that before Lyndon Johnson's policies and the welfare state that was created in the United States, I'm not talking about good, bad, or indifferent. Black families were, Black marriage rates were significantly higher.
Well, what about
They're
other
rising
things that
again
might
in America. That's a good thing.
What
We should
about other
celebrate
things
that.
that may have contributed to maybe the decline in marriage rates, which, by the way, is not unique to Black families. That's happening actually across racial groups. But what about other things? I mean, what about redlining? Do you think that had an effect on the Black family? What about mass incarceration? What about the war on drugs, which was pushed by a Republican president whose advisor said it was specifically to target Black people? What about all of those things?
Look, if you want to talk about redlining and a lot of the other policies that were put forward, quite frankly, by the Democrat Party, if you're going to go back to Jim Crow, because Jim Crow was Democrat policies.
Well,
that's what that was.
I know that you know this.
Don't cut me off when I'm trying to make a point.
Let me just, I have to correct a factual point here. I know that you know that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party of today are ideologically not what they were during Jim Crow. You know that, Congressman. So to suggest that, the Democrats of 1920 are the same ideologically as the Democrats of today is inaccurate. So just, you can continue, but
that's not totally true, Abby. And I think if we want to have that conversation about the policy positions between Republicans and Democrats, we can have that conversation. But
one of the other
Abby,
things,
do you want to have a conversation?
One of the other things,
I'm trying to understand how you want to
brought it up, because since you brought it up on the conservative thing, the other thing that you said was Black people voted more conservatively. Were you talking about them voting for Republicans?
In part, yeah, because that's just an empirical fact. That's what we know that did happen. And the only corollary that I am making is that when families are together and now you're trying to find a way for you to build wealth within your family unit, you're thinking about public policy in a myriad of ways. Because at the end of the day, you want your children to be able to stand on your shoulders. I was very, very fortunate. My mother was able to build a platform for me to be able to stand on and to be able to achieve. Same for my sisters. I'm a very blessed individual because of that. My only point is that when you have a family unit, husband and wife living together, striving together, grinding together, raising children together, you start thinking about public policy in a myriad of ways. And my belief is that dynamic allows people to start thinking about public policy in a much more conservative way as opposed to a much more progressive way. That's my point.
That might be, I mean, I think you're a Republican, so you're entitled to that opinion. But I think what people are taking issue with is you made a couple of statements of fact. And one of the things I was asking you about whether you were talking about Black people voting for Republicans, in the time period that you're talking about, the LBJ time period, they started voting for Democrats. And the reason is because of civil rights, because a Democratic president was passing bills that gave them rights. The Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1965, the Housing Fairness Act. So do you acknowledge that when Black voters vote for Democrats, it's actually because there's a history there. There's a reason that they voted for Democrats in that time period, not because they were just getting welfare money.
Abby, let me be clear. I don't deny that. I think it's also important for the record to be clear that you had the vast majority of Democrats in the Senate were filibustering the 64 Civil Rights Act led by Robert Byrd, who, by the way, was a mentor to Joe Biden when he went into the United States Senate. So if we're going to talk about the history, let's talk about it clearly and completely. Republicans have been the ones who are pushing not just the 64 Civil Rights Act, but the other 4 Civil Rights Acts that occurred before 1964. That's the history of the country. I'm not denying that.
Southern Democrats who
can
opposed,
I finish my point? All I'm asking is to finish my point.
On the facts here, there were Southern Democrats who opposed these civil rights bills, but a majority of them voted for it. It was also led by a Democratic president. So you acknowledge that. Southern Democrats were recruited into the Republican Party in the time period after that. So when you talk about this, you just have to acknowledge that there's been a switch happening in the two parties. It's not the same today as it was during Jim Crow. And so when you say that Black people voted conservatively, that actually doesn't really tell us anything. It just tells us that they voted for the Republican Party, which is a different thing than it is for today.
This lock right here is bugging me. But nevertheless, like I said in my last video, Byron Donalds was trying to insinuate in his statement that Black people were better off during the Jim Crow era because the Black family was stronger and Black people were getting married during that era. And he was doing that because he was trying to muddy the facts of the history. That's my opinion and why Byron Donalds brought up Jim Crow, because he could have made the statement alone that Black families are trying to come together, and that's why they're going towards the Republican Party, because they're supposed to be the party of family values. He could have just said that without bringing in the Jim Crow era. But he brought in the Jim Crow era because he was being intellectually dishonest. He was trying to erase how barbarically white people treated Black people during that era by romanticizing or insinuating that in this one aspect of the Black community, things were better. Shout out to Abby Phillips. Y'all let me know your thoughts down below.
Like, seriously, lovelies, I know it was actually going to get to this extent. Now he is claiming that the Democrats have actually twisted his words, that they have twisted what he previously said. But when I went back to, see the video, check the video and see if actually these people twisted his words, then that should be the case. But I found out that he specifically mentioned that during the Jim Crow era that Black families were together, which is a good thing. And this is the same thing that have been going viral. This is the same thing that the Republican he was talking about have said. This is what have been going viral. This is what, they said Republican that he claimed that actually twisted his word have been saying. You said that, during the Jim Crow era, that black people were together. They were all together. So it was cool. It was okay then. Meaning that you preferred that era. You preferred it. And now you're just trying to make it look like black people cannot have a family, or they can't keep a family. Like, this are one of the reasons that people keep disrespecting black community or black people or whatever. I think I know where he's trying to go. He want to make it look as if that during that Jim Crow era, black people were together, they were with their family, family, mother and father, they were striving together, raising their children together. You know how it is, like family oriented. Maybe because there was Jim Crow during that period, so that was the reason why things were actually working out in a black family or black community or something. But now, there are a lot of maybe family, there's no family, maybe there are different, family have been raised differently, maybe different fathers, mothers, everybody living on their own differently. So maybe he's trying to say that, okay, in this era, which there is no Jim Crow, that families are not living together. Mother and father are not there to raise their children, making it making their kids to grow up in an irresponsible manner. Or maybe there's a lot of baby mamas, baby papas, and all of that. Black community is not arranged and all of that, without him realizing that this same thing that is happening in the black community is still happening in other community. But why it seems as if black people's own are too elaborate, like there's too much, is because we actually bring out our shit outside. Like, we make our problems public. Why other community might have the same thing going on in their community, but they chose to keep it to themselves. But we are too quick to bring out all our whatever outside. We are too quick to bring out whatsoever the thing that is happening in our community outside. But it's not as if other people don't have their own shenanigans, they don't have their own thing, they don't have their own, disadvantage. It's not as if other communities don't have things going on in their family, or maybe you can't find single parenthood homes in other community. But the problem is that we often bring out our problems outside. Like I said, as if we are just our own problems. Like, how could he, even as a black person, even if let's just assume that what he's saying is, oh yeah, he's on point, he's saying the truth, he's hitting the nail on the head. So must you come outside and say it? Must you come outside and it's like, oh, black families saying this in a public? Or do you think that other communities do not have their own problems? Like, seriously, other communities have their own problems. Okay, let's just take for instance of this thing that is going on between black women and black men. Some black men, most of these passport bros tend to like, oh, black women is not marriageable. That's why most of all these athletes or men that is well-to-do end up getting married to pan-colored women and all of that. Let's just use this as an example. Do you think that maybe Hispanic people, Asian people do not have, their own problems in their community? There are other races that still marry outside of their race. There are other races that still marry pan-colors, Asian and all of that. But why is it that our own, we are always quick to bring our own outside? We're always, oh my God, black women, black men. Like, why? We are supposed to be our own brother's keeper. We're supposed to be cleaning each other's, you know what I mean? Not trying to like, okay, I am a pick-me, like I am more better than these people. Like, how can I be more? Like, this actually reminds me of Kanye. There was a time Kanye was, oh my God, she was all over the place. She was just all over the place. She was against everything. She even said her people are the problem and all of that. When she was working with this, what is the name of this company again that fired her? Like, this is the same thing. We were supposed to be cleaning each other's, but we end up bringing each other out. Then how do you expect other people to respect us? How do you expect them to respect us? If we can actually say all of this publicly, I know how the internet, that is just, one thing about us. And now he's making it look as if, okay, the Democrats are actually using this against him as a weapon. He's just trying to like deny the fact that he never mentioned something like that. But when you go back to play, you see that he said it with his mouth. You brought up Jim Crow era. The Democrat never brought that up. You did that to yourself. So why are you trying to make it feel, seems as if people are just trying to put words into your mouth, but you actually brought up this. Like seriously. Like, we have to really do better. Like, black people have to do better. Especially when we, see ourselves in a certain position, trying to like, okay, since I'm in this, position, I can say whatever I want to say to look good in the eyes of these people. And I can even go against my own people in order to look good in the eyes of these, people. Just like, Candice Owen. Remember her own era. Oh my God. She even had to make statement with George Floyd and all of that. How black people was actually the reason they always have these problems and all of that. Until when she returned back to her senses, she made a statement of Christ is King and how she was just being human for the first time, and her job was taken away from her. This is how these people are. This is how they are. This is why most people do not trust them. They don't want to work with them. Like, most black people just want to be on their own. Because if you're like, okay, I want to go against my people, I just want to say things against my people, for me to gain solidarity to these people, and let me see if you're just deceiving yourself. Because you still be the person that will come back to actually ask or beg your own people to accept you back. And by then, maybe it might be too late for you. It might be too late for you. The more we try to point at the truth, try to work with each other, try to like do things for the betterment of one another, the better for us. If you said this and you have okay, I have made a mistake, I'm so sorry. That could have just been better than trying to argue for. You argued, and this is exactly what you said. Anyways, lovelies, why not just leave me your own thoughts in the comment section of what you think of this video, and don't forget that we do not support any form of bullying, harassment, or whatsoever. We're just here for educational and informative video purposes. So please share this video, subscribe to this channel if you're here to do that, and I will see you lovelies when I upload. I've watched up to this extent. Thank you so much for all the love and support. Why not just leave me your own thoughts in the comment section of what you think of this video. And do not forget that we do not support any form of bullying, harassment, or whatsoever. We're just here for educational purposes. So please share this video, subscribe to this channel if you're here to do that, and I will see you lovelies when I upload the next one.